Hello, Mr. Ron DeFore. Are you with me? Mr. Ron DeFore, are you with me?
I'm with you.
Welcome to Gigi in the 561. Thank you so much for your time today. And I know you are very busy, so I appreciate it very much. We are here to talk about Mr. Ron DeFore's wonderful book and so much more. I was intrigued when I saw the book and the name, Ron DeFore, because as a fan of Mr. Don DeFore for a number of years, I was very intrigued. And we're going to get to talk about Don DeFore and so much more. But first, let me tell you just a little bit about our guest today on Gigi in the 561. Ron DeFore has written a marvelous book. It is filled, and I mean brimming, with great stories, anecdotes, and so much information. It's a real family book you could read together as a family. It's absolutely wonderful. But also, Ron DeFore is a business executive. He is a lifelong entrepreneur with about 20 careers, he says. So we have much to cover and much to talk about. So thank you again, Ron, for being here today.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you and your audience.
First up, your book, I want to say what the name of it is. And while it has this name, there's so much more to it than what it may appear. The name of this great book is called Growing Up in Disneyland. Now, who wouldn't want to do that, right? But at one point in your life, you really were kind of tired of going to Disneyland, and we're going to get to all of that. I want to tell you, you did this book, and you said it was like a hybrid of really your dad, your very famous dad, Don DeFore, and you. And as I read through the book, I almost felt like it was like a Neiman Marcus catalog where they send out these great catalogs, and in the first part, it's all about women clothes, and then you flip it over, and the other side is men. And it made me think about that because of the beautiful way you merge the two stories together, and there's so much in your book. And we're going to talk about the book, and we're going to talk about your dad. But first, I really want to talk about your mother. Because I was riveted by her story, Marion. And the reason for that was, first of all, she's very beautiful. And she was the singer who made the song I'm a Little Teapot famous. And that's one of the first songs I ever learned as a child.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know about my mom. Many, as you've indicated, remember my dad from the more than 35 feature films that he was in, co-starred in more than a dozen with some of the Hollywood's greats, John Wayne, Rock Hudson, Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis. I could go on and on. But my mom, had a bit of fame herself. Now, it only lasted, maybe 5 or 6 years. It was the late 30s and early 40s, and they got married in 1942. And in those days, it was, much more accustomed for the wife to, let go of her career, but they did that mutually. My dad didn't make her do that. But during that short career, she was the featured singer for Henry Bussey Orchestra and Art Castle and his Castles in the Air in the Chicago area. They both toured the country, and they both recorded with my mom as the featured vocalist. I have about 20 of those recordings, and as you noted, the one that was made famous was I'm a Little Teapot.
I love that. I really do. And I've taught it to my granddaughter when she was little. She's 8 now, but when she was little, it's one of the first songs I taught her. So, and your mom went on to be a very well-known realtor as well later on in her life. I found her to be very interesting. I watched some videos of your family. I watched the interview with Helen O'Connor, who came into your home, and your mom and dad were just such a great couple. I you could see how much they cared about each other. It was lovely. It was, your dad had such a distinctive voice. I think to me, whenever he spoke, when I really fell in love with your dad was in a film called Romance on the High Seas. And in book, it was his memoirs that you had merged together with your own. If you can tell us how you made that sort of happen. You had all of his words already written.
Well, I need to back up a bit. The title is a metaphor for my life growing up in a Hollywood celebrity family and surviving, so many of the stories that we hear about kids growing up in that area and with that wealth don't turn out well. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the books that are put out are kiss and tell, and they have all these terrible stories. And my book's the opposite of that. I mean, I had a very good upbringing. My parents were relatively conservatives with us 5 kids, and that paid off because, when I left the house, I knew how to earn a living. And as you mentioned, I have a chapter titled "My 20 Careers" because I was successful at most, not all, but at most, and. So, I mean, that's part of the story. I've found by the many comments on Amazon and elsewhere that one of the most common comments is they love the book because it brings them back to a time when things were a lot happier and simpler, and especially in these times, mm-hmm. Regardless of which side of the political fence you are on, I think we'd all agree that, 30, 40, 50 years ago, things were a lot simpler, and people like to be transported in that when they read this book. And then you have the added attraction of reading about my dad, Don DeFore, who wasn't a huge superstar. I mean, his name is not like John Wayne, but when you start reading the book, you see that he accomplished a lot more than most people know about Don DeFore. He's got a star on Hollywood Boulevard. Many people don't know that he was president of the Television Academy in 1954 and accomplished what nobody else had ever been able to do before, and that was he sold the national broadcast of the Emmy Awards to NBC in 1954, and they were elated, and so they voted him in as president for another year. One of the people that wanted to meet the guy that was able to pull that off was Walt Disney, and that began the Disney connection. We became very good friends with them. He asked our family to be in the opening day parade in 1955, and then a year and a half later, he was asked to own his own restaurant in Frontierland. He was the only person to ever own a food facility inside Disneyland bearing the name of a real person. It was called Don DeFore's Silver Banjo Barbecue in Frontierland, and thus the title of the book is a double entendre. It's both a metaphor for my life, but literally for 5 years of my youth, from 7 years old to 12, we were down at Disneyland all the time.
Now, you and some of your friends were kind of scamps every now and then at Disney, where you would hide in some of the rides, and I say I've read the book. And throw things into the water, and you were kids having a great time, and those were really cute stories that you shared.
Well, yes, I've got 3 chapters dedicated to our experience in Disneyland, and the main theme is, what would kids do if they got completely bored with all the attractions that the park has to offer. In fact, as you know, one of the chapters is called, "Gee, do we have to go to Disneyland again?" Exactly. But a lot of these stories and stunts that we pulled off, Disney Corporation is not real happy about. They held up publication of the book, but we finally came to a compromise. And I can understand that they don't want to be encouraging kids today to do what we were able to get away with back in the 50s.
Of course, but again, it was a different time, and it was just good fun. But you also did something kind of fun as an adult, where after the restaurant had been closed for a number of years, and there was a certain plaque that was made. That's a great story. I really like that story.
Yeah, I'll tell you briefly, but in the book I go into detail. But, my brother and I had always thought it's a shame that there's not some kind of plaque memorializing that unique part of Disneyland. And I've learned time and time again from Disneyland historians and enthusiasts that they love to hear our stories, and they love any artifacts or anything from that restaurant, because it is just a really unusual, bizarre part of the history. So I decided one time I'm going to make my own plaque, make it look like it's officially Disney. The right font and the Disneyland castle logo and everything was made out of brass. And my mom, my 80-year-old mom, my brother, and I wound up going into the park and didn't go on any rides. Again, we're a little bit jaded. We've done everything there. So we just went into Frontierland and waited until nobody was looking and put up the plaque, and it stayed up for almost a year.
Unreal.
And there's so we actually had to keep on putting up plaques. But the weird thing is that after the book was published, I called my brother because he did a lot of the editing. He was very helpful. I said, "Do you realize that we left out one of the other plaques? That the book only talks about placing 2 plaques, but there was actually a third one, and I just totally forgot about that one in between." So if I were ever to do a second edition, I'd have to, update that part.
You would definitely need to include that in this great book, Growing Up in Disneyland. I want to back up just another moment, if we could, to your dad being involved with the Emmy Awards in the very beginning and being so responsible for getting that. That was quite an accomplishment on many levels, not just for the selling of it to NBC, but also the actual venue. And I don't want to give away too much of this book because people need to read it, because all of these stories are absolutely riveting. They're so well done, and so I don't want to tell everything about what all your dad kind of went through to get that, even kind of involved a fire department at one time and so forth. But he also got a little Emmy, and then it got broken, and then the Emmy Arts and Sciences, they replaced it, and you have a video out there of you unwrapping that Emmy, and I found that to be very, very touching. And what people may not know is where the name Emmy came from. It was actually named for the kind of a bulb inside movie cameras. That's kind of where that name came from. But the replacement Emmy is so beautiful, and you unwrapping that was, I found that very touching and very much honoring your dad and for his huge, huge accomplishment of getting that on the air.
Yes, well, and let me interject. These videos that you're referring to, anybody can access them. Just go to YouTube and type in my name, Ron DeFore, and I've got a channel with a number of those, including a 5-minute trailer that I produced that's kind of all the highlights of the book itself.
Okay.
So, and also for more information about the book, is the book's website, growingupindisneyland.com, and there you can even order a autographed copy of the book, which I find more and more people are going to, especially because on Amazon, I guess It's going well because they're currently out of stock. So it's like
that's great news.
Yeah, I mean it's good news, and so I have a limited quantity here, but I do sell them out of the house and sign them, and you can have your own personalized greeting if you want. So yeah, just go to growingupindisneyland.com if you're interested.
Oh, that's great. As you mentioned, your father was in many movies. He was in over 30 movies. He was a very famous neighbor, one of the first neighbors that appeared in television before everyone had a neighbor. It appeared as Thorny, the neighbor on Ozzie and Harriet. And he was also very, very well known for playing Mr. Baxter, Mr. B, in Hazel with the incredible Shirley Booth, who was an Academy Award-winning actress of amazing talent. But in the first episode of Hazel, Ron DeFore, as number 7 on the football team, made your appearance. You were also on Hazel.
Right. Yeah. It just so happened that as my dad was reading the script for the first episode, he noticed that at the end scene that little Harold, the son in the show, had to have 5 or 6 friends his size and his age in football uniforms, because that's what the scene was. And so I guess my dad just said to the director, "Hey, I'll give you the kids, okay?" And so it was me, my cousin Pat, and also Barry Van Dyke. I was good friends with the Van Dykes. So actually, Chris Van Dyke, the older son, was more my age, but my dad said, "No, Chris is way too big." Chris grew a lot faster than most of us, but Barry was the right size, so he's in the scene as well.
Well, it was very, very cute. I like the fact that when you were growing up, all of you had to do chores. Your parents they tried in a very trying situation. I'm sure they're in celebrity world to give you and your siblings a normal upbringing, and so you had to earn your own money, and you had chores that you had to do, and it kind of carried through with you as you grew up and became this person who has had so many interesting, way too many things to talk about in our very limited time on the podcast today, but you have had so many entrepreneurial opportunities. You were, I believe, you can correct me anywhere I'm wrong here, but an assistant director on the Steve Allen show. You were for 1 hour a disc jockey at Studio 54. This is one of my favorite things. You met a lot of celebrities. You met a lot of rock stars, and all of that is revealed in your book, Growing Up in Disneyland. But you were a flying DJ. Do you want to talk about that? Because I really didn't ask you if you wanted to talk about anything in particular of your career, but I found that a really fun thing that you did.
Well, and I'll back up. So I did not finish college. I completed almost 2 years at the University of Oregon. I also did 1 quarter at UCLA Night School. But, I wasn't a real academic. And that summer, I got a job in the mailroom at KTLA TV in Los Angeles, Channel 5. And I loved it. And it was just, I just really loved being in that business. And by the end of the summer, I'd been promoted a couple of times up. And I had a radio show at the University of Oregon, and I was interested in broadcast. But, I thought, do you go back to school and learn about broadcast, or you just stay in it? And to me, it was a no-brainer. I'm just going to stay here. So that's how I eventually got to be the associate director of the Steve Allen Show. Is I joined their staff, and I got promoted like 5 or 6 times, ultimately getting to be associate director. So all this time, my friends were still going to college, and So I from KTLA, I had an interim thing that I talk about. Too bizarre for me to spend time here to talk about it. But then I got back into television at Paramount Television, and so I had spent quite many years climbing ladders while my friends, were just finishing college and looking for work. So I hit my midlife crisis when I was about 26, a lot younger than most people, and that was being unemployed for a while, but then just kind of morphing into what this new weird business that a friend of mine in Malibu had started, and that was mobile disc jockeying. He actually built his own equipment, with the two turntables, and this was before disco. This was, we were playing rock and roll, and so I got into being a DJ for a mobile DJ company, for parties, and I mean we were doing like Linda Ronstadt's house in Malibu and Rod Stewart, and, some really fun parties, but to me it was just fun because all my life I'd been a musician, lead guitar in many bands and stuff. So this was my midlife crisis. I didn't look at it as a long-term career. It was just a heck of a lot of fun, partying and spinning records, and so this company, Captain Disco, wound up being in the perfect spot when disco did hit LA. At one point, we were supplying DJs and music to about 25 clubs in the Southern California area, and I had become the head disc jockey. Again, to me, I wasn't taking it seriously, but one thing I did learn at an early age is whatever you do your best. And so I was having fun, but I became very good. And so right at the height of the disco craze, some wealthy entrepreneurs buy this 4-story building in Westwood, which is the UCLA community, and they announced that they're going to be opening up a 4-story discotheque called Dylan's, and they contacted Les, the owner of Captain Disco, and negotiated a contract, and I said, that's me, I'm going to head up. And so there were like 4 floors, and I was the head DJ and managing all the DJs for that. 2 years later, or a year later, it was getting so popular, they opened up a huge place downtown Los Angeles. They bought a big ballroom with a 30-foot ceiling, and they spent millions of dollars on all the attractions that would be in there. One of them being they put a monorail track up on the ceiling so that, one of their big attractions would be a flying DJ.
I love that.
And when we heard about that, once again I said, Les, we know who that is going to be. And so for about almost a year, I was the flying DJ at Dylan's. It became pretty famous, as silly as it is.
I think it's wonderful.
One of the local stations, the ABC affiliate, even did a story. In fact, I think I have that now on my YouTube channel. That they did a profile on the club and the whole disco craze, and then they cut to me for a while. And so, it was crazy. And the thing I love is I'll be here's a spoiler alert because it's one of my favorite stories in the book that I just hopped from interesting DJ gigs, one after another, and one of them was Australia opening up the largest entertainment center in their country, and they had contacted Les, and I again looked at the contract. I said, man, we know who this is going to be. They wanted the best DJ in the United States, so I just raised my hand, and so. But anyway, Les, I didn't pay attention to how he was promoting me. I guess he was, just sending them newspaper clips about the flying DJ and all these things, and so I'm, on this long 19-hour flight to Brisbane, Australia. And they had rented me a condo and told me they'd pick me up and just drive me there. And I remember telling them, I'm probably going to be tired, so I just want to crash. So, but as I get off the plane and I'm in this shabby Captain Disco T-shirt and probably dirty blue jeans and sneakers and stuff, and there's all these camera crews around, and I'm kind of wondering what some dignitary must be landing or something, and no, it was one of the owners of the disco, shaking my hand. He said, "Mr. DeFore, we have to go inside. They want to talk to the flying DJ."
Oh no!
And I'm going, oh God, I'm not dressed for this one, and the first question that comes to me with the microphone in my face. Oh, so Mr. DeFore, can you explain to us just exactly how you fly?
Oh no.
And I'm thinking, oh come on, now Les didn't tell them. I mean, you have a 30-foot ceiling and a stuntman harness and a monorail track to make that work. So it was just. That was quite a moment. I think that's the first time I learned to be a spin doctor, which is ultimately what the latter half of my career was in public relations, serving as a spokesperson for various entities.
Well, I loved it, and so I really appreciate you talking about it. I know you have to go here momentarily, but there's one more thing that I wanted to mention because it's just so I really hated to read this about the painting that you had, and in the clip that I saw of the Here's Hollywood, Helen O'Connor coming in and visiting your home and talking about the furniture that your dad made, and there's so much that your dad did make apparently out of different things around your home, but the painting that was consequently stolen in 2009 from you, Dragon on Parade, it ended up being Margaret King that actually painted that.
Right.
Was not identified that at the time, and everyone knows the story, or they should know the Tim Burton film Big Eyes about that. And now you don't have it, and I thought when I read that again, I'm giving something away there, but because I had actually seen it and your parents talked about it in that clip, and it was so awful that it was stolen.
Yeah, some people that are old enough will remember that in the early 60s to mid-60s that the Keane paintings were very, very popular, the Big Eyes.
Yeah.
And my dad latched on to that very early on, and we became friends with Walter and Margaret. In fact, we stayed with them up at their home in just south of the Bay Area in San Francisco. And yeah, unfortunately, I mean, we still have, I think about 8 or 9 of them. I have one here. My brother is an art collector, so I think he has most of them. But yeah, the one that was the most valuable was stolen from my parents' house right when we were, the last few days when we were clearing it out after my mom had passed and putting the house up for sale. And to this day, we don't know who it was. It's still up on the Los Angeles Police Department's website, and it's a big mystery.
Yeah, that's really a shame. There's so much great stuff, Ron, in your book and in your history, certainly your history and your father's long career that everyone has enjoyed, movie buffs enjoy to this day. That's the beauty of being able to watch streaming and having things on DVD. Nothing ever really goes away. It's out there, and there's so many great stories in your book that you have shared with the world, and it's absolutely wonderful to have all of this captured in growing up at Disneyland. There are stories on his dad's side, or your dad's side, talking about listeners there, about Marilyn Monroe. There are a couple of really cute stories about that that I enjoyed reading. Many, many great stories about you, with the stories about you with the Beatles and different celebrities and things that you did. And you lived in a rarefied world, and yet your parents seemed to be so grounded, and your sister helped at a very young age with orphans in Korea. I mean, what a wonderful family story you have. And
yeah, let me just interject and make a point that I almost made earlier, but I'll make it stronger. That my parents brought us up conservatively. Now, but there was a slight twist to that. If you were to look at the photos of our house, which I have up on my Facebook, I put them up on our Facebook page before. My dad bought 2 lots, not just one, 2 lots at the corner of Mandeville Canyon and Mandeville Lane. Now, that's in the heart of Brentwood. And those people that don't know Brentwood, I guess they didn't know OJ, the OJ story. Right. But yeah. Brentwood is right between Bel Air and Pacific Palisades. I mean, especially now, it is like prime real estate on the planet. And he built a huge house. We had a great backyard. We had a tennis court, a pool, a big grass lawn, a trampoline. So as a family, we were pretty privileged and had a pretty good, house to live on and a great neighborhood. But individually, they would be very strict with, what they would, and it wasn't really giving us anything. Like when I wanted a Fender guitar and amplifier, I had to convince them that I would take lessons, and I had to borrow the money from them, and then I would work it off, mowing the lawn and painting the house, whatever work needed to be done. I can tell you, I didn't know any other friends that had to do that kind of stuff. So in my youth, I was very resentful and angry that my dad would do that, knowing that he was pretty well off. Right. But the day I left, when I was 18, to go off to college and live on my own, it really sank in. I knew the value of money. I knew the value of work. And tragically, there was very little of that growing up, and I'm sure there's probably not any of that today. So I know I have friends that I grew up with that didn't have that upbringing, that died very early, and 2 of them, my best friends, right across the street, never left their house, and they died in their 40s living with their parents.
Tragic. I will close with, and we'll add some more things, but with one more thing, spoiler, but it's a little one, because it's really, I think, very cool. You also had at your home a bell that your mom would ring, and when that bell would sound, you could hear it from quite a distance.
It was not a little one. It was a huge train bell from an old-fashioned steam engine. My dad's father, my grandfather, was a railroad engineer, so a lot of the stuff in the house had railroad motif, and that was one of them. So he had the builder build an actual cupola over this bell and a bell tower at the top of the house above the kitchen. And so through the second story down to the kitchen was this big rope. And my mom could ring it, and we all knew then it was dinner time. And not only us kids, but everybody in the neighborhood down a mile away. They'd all go, "Oh, it must be 6 o'clock."
I love that. I love that so much. And thank you so much. I know that you are limited on time today, and you've given us so much for the podcast. So, Mr. Ron DeFore, thank you.
Thank you, Pam.
I really appreciate it. And to my listeners, you need to look up both Ron DeFore and his book. Go to Amazon. You can find it there. Stay with me, Ron, just a second. I want you to add something. But look up his father's films, because there were over 30 of them. He's wonderful. You can also see streaming. Everything's out there. Hazel, the TV show from the 60s. Ozzie and Harriet. Not sure if it's still out there, where he played the neighbor, Thorny. But look up Don DeFore. It's DeFore. And his son that's been with us today, and in his time so graciously with Gigi in the 561, today, Mr. Ron DeFore. Now, Ron, before I let you go, I want you to tell everyone the best way to connect with you, of course, through Amazon, and you've mentioned it already, but if you would tell us again, best way to reach out to you?
Well, the best way, and I encourage people, it's only like a couple bucks extra for the shipping for me to send you one that's personally autographed, and that's by coming to growingupindisneyland.com, and you'll see some other things there, but there is a link to buy an autograph copy. Also, to just see a list of my dad's film and TV credits, I have a website, DeFore, DEFORE.net.
Okay, great. Everyone, you know what to do. You can always find our podcast on northpalmbeachlife.com, but they're also always available at iTunes, Pandora, Spotify, and too many platforms to name. Appreciate Mr. Ron for being with us today. I'm Gigi in the 561. You know what to do. Stay with us.